Did you know that Lewis Hamilton ended up outside the top 9 in the free practices of the Austrian GP, with a newly updated Ferrari? What is really happening between the 7-time champion and the Scuderia? What revealed the data is much more worrying about what we thought. And the Austria Grand Prix, held at the always demanding Red Bull Ring, was the ideal scenario to start consolidating that narrative. Ferrari arrived with a new aerodynamic configuration, centered mainly on the flat background of the SF25, with the intention of recovering land against McLaren and Mercedes. It was the first great technical test of the year with very high expectations. But what happened that Friday was an uncomfortable revelation, even painful. From the first moments of the FP1, the situation was anything but ideal. Hamilton could barely complete a few competitive laps before a fault in the gearbox interrupted his progress. It was not a simple breakdown, it was a strategic interruption at a key moment of the weekend. In a circuit like Austria, where improvement margins are scarce and precision is everything, wasting track time is equivalent to being out of conversation. Training are not only to mark fast times but to build trust, calibrate the balance of the car, and establish a solid base for classification and career. Ferrari not only failed to offer a reliable car to Hamilton, he removed one of the most important tools to compete. The result of that first session was a 9th place that, beyond the final time, transmitted a feeling of helplessness. The 1:6.099 that marked not only left it more than 8/10 of the leader, but also placed it behind cars that in theory should be below Ferrari in technical hierarchy. And while that margin was already worrying, what came later was even more. Because when the FP2 arrived and the team had already solved the technical problem, a step forward was expected. It did not happen. With more gum track and more representative conditions, Hamilton barely achieved the 10th time. 1:5.511. Almost a second of the best chrono of Lando Norris. This showed more than an adaptation problem. In the modern F1, a second per lap is an abyss. It is the type of difference that separates a contender by the title of a half-table team. And for someone with the experience, talent, and resources of Hamilton, that lag cannot be explained solely by minor adjustments. The awkward truth is that the SF25, even with its updates, remains an unpredictable car. And what is more serious, Ferrari does not seem at all why. This weekend starts left Hamilton in a disconcerting situation. Not only for times on screen, but for the lack of responses within the garage. In his post-session statements, the tension was visible. There was no drama, but a left of frustration contained, that feeling that the path that he believed to be beginning with Ferrari is perhaps more full of obstacles of the expected. The illusion of the preseason, the good feelings of the tests in Bahrain, even the flashes in Australia and China, all that quickly faded before the relentless mirror of the data. And that Friday in Austria, the mirror did not return the image of a contender to Hamilton, but that of a pilot trapped in a car that does not know how to win. What makes it truly alarming this weekend for Lewis Hamilton and Ferrari is not simply the lack of pure performance. What was exposed in the Red Bull Ring goes far beyond the times. What manifested was a structural disconnection, a lag between the pilot's needs and the car responses. And that, in a team like Ferrari with all its resources, its history and its institutional pressure, is a critical alarm signal. Because the technical can be adjusted, but when the problem is human and structural, the damage is filtered to each corner of the performance. One of the most revealing details was how Hamilton failed to extract performance from the new aerodynamic package centered on the SF25 floor. On the paper, this update should provide greater stability in medium curves and better traction in slow exits, two of the historical weaknesses of the car. But telemetry revealed inconsistencies in the delivery of aerodynamic load between sectors, making it difficult for the car to remain predictable in changes of direction. For a pilot like Hamilton, who bases his style on soft transitions, progressive energy, and precision management in braking, these irregularities are an invisible but decisive barrier. To this is added an even more critical issue: communication with his career engineer, Riccardo Adami. The relationship between pilot and engineer in Formula One is an intimate, almost symmetrical society, where every word, every silence, each instruction can change the destiny of a career. But during the FP2, when Hamilton was involved in an incident with the young Kimi Antonelli, it was clear that something is not working well in that dynamic. The fact that the British received his 3rd warning of the season for hindering Mercedes in Curve 4 is not a minor event. It is the symptom of unenconscioned communication. Adami had warned by radio, but Hamilton reacted late, moving dangerously towards the ideal line. An avoidable but deeply revealing error. That episode not only added an unnecessary tension to his day, but also showed a deeper fracture. The flow of information in Ferrari is misaligned. Why does a team with this infrastructure fail to coordinate something as basic as practical traffic management? Why doesn't a world champion have full security that his team is guiding him correctly at every critical moment? What should be a perfect synergy between talent and machine, between human and technology, is becoming a constant struggle for interpretation and adaptation. And that fight is exhausting. Hamilton's body language in the Austrian paddock said everything. There was a fatigue that was not physical but mental. An invisible load that weighs more than the helmet itself. Ferrari, who hired him with the promise of offering him a car to win again, seems to be giving him a lesson of humility through technical frustration. And he, accustomed to machines that responded as extensions of his will, now has to relier each parameter from scratch, in an environment where each failure is measured with magnifying glass. In short, the conflict in Austria is not limited to a difficult car or a bad session. It is the reflection of a system that has not yet managed to completely integrate the most successful pilot of his generation. A system where technology and psychology are not yet found. And while that does not happen, every return that Hamilton complete will be one more fighting against his own team, instead of his rivals on the track. If at one end of the paddock was the frustration and confusion of Ferrari, in the other the technical superiority of McLaren was erected with absolute clarity. The Austrian GP not only served to undress the limitations of the SF25 and the disconnection between Hamilton and its new environment, but also to expose with crudeness how an organized structure, focused and harmonically executed, can transform every second of practice into a demonstration of power. McLaren did not limit himself to leading the times. He did it with ease and consistency that they bordered the insulting. And that difference, when observed precisely, reveals much more than simple chronos. Lando Norris was the one who left the absolute reference recorded in FP2, 4.580. A devastating time that was not the product of an isolated magical return, but the culmination of a perfectly aligned technical set. The truly terrifying for his rivals is that, just behind, his partner Oscar Piastri remained only 157 thousandths, confirming that it was not an individual flash, but a direct validation of pure performance of the MCL39. The consistency between the two pilots reflects not only the level of preparation of the equipment, but a deep understanding of the behavior of the car in a demanding layout such as the Red Bull Ring. And it was not only in the classification rhythm where McLaren made differences. In career simulations where heavier fuel loads are used and the degradation of tires in real conditions is proven, the British team shone again. While other squires dealt with survival, irregular wear or tensile instability, the MCL39 showed a predictable, balanced and efficient response. Each long return of Norris and Piastri was not only competitive, but showed a progressive evolution, a silent domain that does not need boasts because it is backed by data. This performance by McLaren charges even more relevance if it is contextualized within the development that they have taken since the end of 2024. Far from falling asleep after winning the Construction Championship, the Woking team adopted a philosophy of aggressive evolution for its new car, working in each component from the ground to the rear suspension. And those efforts, invisible to the casual spectator, are those that now generate a difference of up to a second by return with respect to a team such as Ferrari, which has also invested time and resources, but whose results are erratic. The comparison is not only painful for Ferrari, it is revealing, because McLaren has not had to invent anything new. What they have done is run better. They have a clear technical line, a synchronized team of engineers, pilots who understand their machine, and a car that reacts as expected. There are no mysteries, there are no communication failures, there are no excuses. Instead, in Ferrari, everything seems conditioned outside error. Each small adjustment depends on uncertain variables, each decision looks like an experiment, each error is multiplied by the lack of structure. And while Hamilton looks for answers within an environment that still does not hug him completely, McLaren becomes the luxury of experimenting, to try limits, to play with adjustment without fear. That operational freedom, that margin of maneuver that gives confidence in machinery, is the big difference. Because in Formula One, the domain is not always screaming. Sometimes it simply runs. And McLaren is doing it with the surgical coldness of a team that has learned from his mistakes, which has corrected his weaknesses and is now reaping the fruits of a solid structure. Faced with that reality, what happens in Ferrari is not just worrying. It is unsustainable if they intend to fight for titles. The 2025 Austria Grand Prix was not simply another disappointing weekend for Ferrari. It was an accurate and public diagnosis of a developing crisis. A clear warning that the narrative that many expected, that of the rebirth of Lewis Hamilton with the rampant Cavallino, is at risk of becoming a disappointment story if urgent measures are not taken. Because this was not an isolated accident, nor a day of bad luck. It was a persistent demonstration back after return that something structurally deep is broken within the technical and human environment of Ferrari. Hamilton, with all his experience, ability to adapt and competitive background, is clearly willing to operate this stage. He has demonstrated it on the track, adjusting his driving style to that of Charles Leclerc himself, assimilating the behavior of the SF25 curve per curve. But even the best pilot needs a reliable platform. And what was seen in Austria was anything but that. The distrust between pilot and machine was accentuated. The connection with his engineer showed cracks difficult to ignore. And the times by return confirmed a brutal truth. Ferrari is not in a position to compete against the best.